Tene Croom talking to Bonnie Boswell, executive producer of a documentary and the niece of Whitney M. Young.
That's right, yes.
Whitney M. Young Jr., I should get that correct.
Whitney M. Young Jr., correct.
And the documentary is The Powerbroker. It's going to be on PBS.
It's going to be on PBS on February 18th, so people should check their local listings for that, but it's going to be on Independent Lens. That's the series it'll be presented on.
I have to tell you, I saw that documentary and I was just blown away. It is fabulous. In a few words, how would you describe the documentary?
I think the documentary is a behind-the-scenes look at the civil rights movement. It shows the complexity and the subtleties of how the whole movement was able to move forward. The fact that you didn't have just one voice at the table, but you had many voices and different voices, and there was an appreciation for different people's roles in that movement. So I think that is one of the big takeaways from this. It's also, in terms of Whitney Young, I think a look at somebody who played a pivotal role behind the scenes. And for that reason, I want to lift his image up, because I think it's important for us moving forward to really look at people who play an effective role, but who may not be out in front getting all the publicity, but who get things done. And I think that's an important kind of role for people to play too.
You don't get black power by chanting it. You get it by doing what the other groups have done. The Irish kept quiet. They didn't shout Irish power or Jew power or Italian power. They kept their mouths shut and took over the police department of New York City and the mayorship of Boston.
Whitney Young's genius was he knew how to accomplish what other people were merely for.
And it's interesting because you said a man who was not out front. He was a face that a lot of people probably didn't know that face, because he was right there alongside Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. playing. He was right there in the meetings with the presidents, but a lot of people didn't know who he was or the name Whitney M. Young Jr., but they really didn't know all of the things that he accomplished. He had a vital role in doing some of the things that today America, not just African Americans and Hispanics, but all of America are feeling. Talk about some of those things.
Well, because Whitney Young was a social worker, he brought those skills to the table. And they are very important skills, because I think it was the mindset to, move beyond simply getting the legislation of desegregation, but to really say, okay, if you want equality, then you're going to have to help people be able to get the skill sets that they need, whether it's education, good jobs, good housing, so that they could be true partners in the society. Well, he really was able to design a program that he called the Domestic Marshall Plan.
There you go.
And
yes.
That Domestic Marshall Plan was important because people in the United States were aware of the Marshall Plan, which had been a program where America had given money to Europe after the war, but we really hadn't had that same sense of responsibility to take care of America's own who had been dispossessed, African Americans, who never had a program to help alleviate the stigma and the impact of slavery and segregation. So nothing had ever been created to bring people along after they've been deprived for hundreds of years. So he said, what we need is a domestic Marshall Plan. So he got people understanding the concept of Marshall Plan. They knew that, but to make it domestic. And he set forth in that policies and programs, such as that became integrated into Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty, because they became very close. When Lyndon Johnson wanted to move forward with the Great Society, he really used Whitney Young as his counsel to be able to help advise him on how to set those kind of programs up.
I think that Whitney Young was a prophet. I think that he died precisely at a time when few people understood how brilliant his vision for racial transformation of American power was.
He was a figure who was calm, who was purposeful, who was measured.
Whitney Young. He's the Wall Street of the civil rights movement.
Whitney understood power, and he understood politics. And most of all, he understood people. They said Martin was in the streets and Roy and Thurgood were in the courts, and Whitney was in the boardroom. One could not have been successful without the other.
You're his niece. What kind of stories, what kind of cute stories, colorful stories do you remember hearing your family talk about, the family stories about Whitney M. Young?
Well, I remember my mom talking quite a bit about the fact that he was always going to the doctor, like it seemed like every month, because he was breaking something, an arm or leg or something like that. So my mom was his older sister, and then there was Uncle Whitney, and then there was a younger sister. And the two younger kids always played, and they were up on the trees. I remember Aunt Eleanor telling the story about how Uncle Whitney and Aunt Eleanor had climbed up to the very, very, very tops of the trees outside of their house. And my grandmother came home and just saw the two of them swaying up there and was just absolutely hysterical, you know. So, and then I think Uncle Whitney got Aunt Eleanor was pushing her on some gate, and she knocked out all of her teeth. I mean, it was just really rough and tumble. But, you know, they had a good time together. It was tough in some ways because, you know, they were in the South. They were not Kentucky, yes. And my grandfather's a principal of a boarding high school there for African-American students. And so my grandparents really took in basically 400 kids every year and helped to raise all of them and learn some of the basics of how to get along in an integrated society. So if somebody came to that school without enough clothes, then my grandmother would go into the closets for her children and pull out clothes for people. So, you know, there were millions of stories, though. Hi, I'm Bonnie Boswell. Please watch The Powerbroker, Whitney Young's Fight for Civil Rights on PBS's Independent Lens, February 18th.